Hello, warriors. Welcome to the You Movement. I am B. It is a beautiful snowy day, gigantic snowfalls just coming down and covering everything in white. I'm in heaven here. I can't get over it. I just can't get over it. But today we are moving on our chakra series to discuss some of the addictions associated with the crown chakra. So we have done an interesting tour through the chakra system, starting with our heart, working our way up and around and around and around like a big old spiral. And I like that Spirit sent us in this direction instead of the usual from root to crown. We've gone through the chakras in a spiral formation, which really is the way that everything works in the universe. You know, if you think about all the black holes and all the interesting shapes and designs of energy, whirlpools, you know. So this kind of energy is what Spirit is showing itself as. So I am wearing some nice violets and white is also associated with the crown chakra. So let's move on, shall we? Okay, so today we're learning about the crown. And now the crown is called Sahasrara. Now, excuse me if my Vedic pronunciation is like way off. Wasn't born with that language. I always feel so like, you know, people always say to me, because I deal with people from all over the world, they're like, I'm so sorry, my English is so bad. And I'm like, well, it's better than my Norwegian. So I apologize to all those people. My Vedic is not so good. But the Vedic translation to that word is 1,000 petals, or the dwelling place without support. Interesting. So I want to talk about the 1,000 petals for just a little bit. We're going to get more into it in a minute. But in another video, like a million years ago, I talked about the different vortices. So each chakra has a whole bunch of different vortices, you know, spirals upon spirals. So the crown chakra has exactly 972 vortices. It's very high, whereas the root chakra has only 4. Right? So as it works its way up within each chakra, so here you've got a chakra, hello chakra, and then within each chakra you have a spiral of energy. That's how the world works, spirals. Spiral of energy. Some of them spirals are turning counterclockwise and some of the spirals are turning clockwise. So some of them are sucking in energy and some of them are eliminating energy, depending on the directionality of the vortice. So the 1,000-petaled chakra is really a rounding up. It's a rounding up because you've got 972 vortices that need to be functioning. So to open our crown chakra is time-consuming. It's so time-consuming, in fact, it takes lifetimes. Lifetimes. We've been doing this ascension process for lifetimes. I guarantee to you in some past life you were a monk in a monastery somewhere, you were a yogi at an ashram somewhere, you vowed poverty somewhere, perhaps you were a witch and you had a witch burning experience, you were dragged out of your community and, you know, put to death for your beliefs. Each time we've had these experiences over lifetimes, we're opening and clearing more of those vortices, okay? So when we have a fully open crown chakra, which the symbol is the lotus, the 1,000-leafed lotus, okay? When we're fully opened, we are fully awakened. We are fully enlightened. We are levitating, folks. So if you think about it, if there's 972 of these lessons that I need to learn over lifetimes, perhaps there's more work to do. Perhaps if I think I'm all there, then I've got another vortice that needs to be opened and cleared out, because the thinking I'm all there is the implication that I'm in spiritual ego. So 972 lessons this all connects to, that needs to have open portals to the higher realms. Do you think you have 972 or the 1,000-leaf lotus all wide open? Or is it more like I have felt that as each lesson comes in, it's like a single solitary petal that's going meow, meow. And so, yeah, we've got a lot of these to open. And perhaps, yes, because of the past life work that we did, we opened some of them in past lives and brought that knowledge with us. And so those lessons may have come a lot faster in this life. But we're still learning lessons, we're still clearing karma, we're still breaking cycles, we're still learning, we're still healing, we're still evolving, we're still enlightening, we're still ascending, okay? So check yourself if you're thinking, I'm all done, okay? Check yourself, because you're not. I'm not, you're not. I would really hazard a guess the only person that might be is the Dalai Lama. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't fully, others. I haven't met them or know of them, maybe a monk living in a Tibetan cave somewhere that is levitating, but we're not, okay? So we still have a lot of work to do, and that means we're going to have to clear out a lot of our beliefs. I talked a good bit about beliefs in the third eye, because this center here is all about our level of understanding. The life lesson here is our spiritual development, our spiritual evolution, our coming to a place of like much, much greater understanding, connection to the divine. So we got a lot to do before we can get to a place where we know, or we just know. This is your claircognizance, just knowing certain things. And until we just know, we have the right to just know, but we have to learn. We also have the right to learn. So this awakening process is a learning process. This human existence is our soul's evolution to come down and learn as much as we can possibly learn. I look at it as like life school. And in life school, there's many lessons, and some of them suck, and some of the teachers suck. But when we see things from a higher perspective, we go, oh, if I didn't have that sucky experience, I wouldn't know about how to use my intuition and trust my intuition. If I hadn't have messed up and had that horrible experience, I would have known what boundaries are and why they're necessary. If I didn't have that narcissistic abusive situation, I wouldn't have known how to save myself, how to stand in my own power, how to say no. If I didn't see what I'm saying? It goes on and on and on. 972 on and on and on. So do you know everything? No. Okay, do you have a shadow aspect of self that thinks that it can know everything? Possibly. I certainly did. If I know more, then I'm going to obtain a certain level of mastery. But the ultimate mastery is learning that I can't know everything, and I don't need to know everything, and that I'm always going to be learning, and that's okay. Mastery comes by accepting and embracing the student, or the servant, master and servant, being in the service of God, being a servant to God is like saying, I can't possibly know everything. There is much greater knowledge to be had outside of my level of awareness within this human form. And on this awakening journey, it's like we are in our doctorate level, okay? Some of us are in our doctorate level of learning. We've done this life thing so many lifetimes already. And so now we are being tested to come into wholeness. And to come into wholeness means going to body school, okay? You got to go to body school and reach a level of mastery in body school, becoming disciplined. What am I feeding myself? How am I in a symbiotic relationship with my soul to my body. We have to go to emotion school and relearn what it is to be human and how it is to emote, and stand in our compassion while we emote. So body school has many lessons of these 972 lessons to learn. So it's like these 972 lessons are divided into like subcategories or sub-schools. And once we've mastered emotion school, where we can sit in the observer and say, oh, look, I'm having anger right now. I'm going to sit in this anger. I'm going to allow this anger. I'm going to express myself through this anger. Maybe I need to get up and shake and dance, put on some Rage Against the Machine and shake it out. And then I'm going to utilize these lessons that each emotion brings. So maybe within the 972 vortices, one of them is the lesson of anger. One of them is the lesson of emotion, despondency. One of them is the lesson of depression, anxiety. So within emotion school, there's a lot of sub-lessons within that. So we need to master every single emotion. Oh, look at me, I'm mastering fear this week. I'm mastering grief. I'm allowing myself to have it. I'm sitting in the observer. I'm showing myself compassion while I have this experience. And then we need to have a mastery over the mind. And mind school is like, oh my God, this thing is crazy. It's run amok. There's a ghost in the machine. Half the things your mind is doing and saying are not even accurate. They're not real, they're not truthful, they're not fair. While every emotion you might experience is valid, I can certainly say that every thought that you experience is not necessarily truth. A lot of them are based in malware, bad programming we received as children, bad programming we received within cultures that have gone back thousands of years of indoctrination. The patriarchal system is a bad program that runs in everybody's mind, whether they want to admit it or not, until you sit down and you say, what's my part in this? Those are more lessons to learn. As a woman, how am I participating in the patriarchal system that is indoctrinated into me? Oh, I'm going out and buying lots of makeup and making myself look a little bit of a way so that I can be obtained by a man? Or as a man, how are you indoctrinated? Or do you believe that you have greater power over women? How has that shown up in your life? And how is it working for you now? So mind school means we need to look at everything we think and say, is this true? Is this valid? Is this real? Perhaps I need to analyze it and sit with it and understanding that a lot of the things that I think are just programming that I'm regurgitating, that is not critical thought, it's not wisdom, it's just parroting what I've been previously taught to parrot. Because a lot of our education is parroting. It's like, remember these dates, remember these facts, remember these stories, and believe them to be truth, when the reality is they aren't necessarily truth. And when we start digging, excavating out to get to the truth of the matter, a lot of the things that we believe are the total polar opposite. Especially on this awakening journey, so much goes into inversion. It's like Alice in Wonderland. I have no doubt, not Alice in Wonderland, yes. I have no doubt that the author of that book that was going through their own spiritual awakening, because what's described in it is a very symbolic interpretation of a lot of things that are all upside down and topsy-turvy and twirly. So it's a very interesting book to look at through the lens of a spiritual awakening. A lot of the stories are interesting to look at through the lens of a spiritual awakening and say, especially fairy tales. I love fairy tales because It's programming. It's indoctrination. This notion that a man is going to ride in on a white horse and save us, when in our own awakening as divine feminines, we save ourselves. We become one with the dragon. You know, that dragon energy. It's no wonder to me in the conscious collective that the Game of Thrones had the story of a very strong, empowered woman who was, you know, the mother of dragons. And something that in traditional stories, we feared the dragon, you know, she became one with the dragon to have a symbiotic relationship, empowered within that energy. And so it's a lot of things that we believed were good are shown to be not so good. You know, a lot of our medical practices, we got to, especially within the realm of the psychological evaluations and labeling system, it's causing a lot of problems for a lot of people. So we have to allow ourselves the wisdom to go into the mind and go to mind school and question everything I believe. Everything I believe. And this is what is the process of spiritual maturity. And then the fourth camp that we go into is the spiritual school, where we start to learn our spiritual gifts and how to use them. We start to connect to spirit and see things from a whole different way, a different perspective. So our right to know comes from a much higher place than just the regurgitation of information that has been passed on. So the element here, you know, I talked about the 5 elements. We're way out of like the material world. We're much into a higher dimension now. So the element here is that of thought and thought forms. And it's almost like with thought forms in the collective consciousness, as we open ourselves to that, it's like you can reach up and just pull a thought form and into your own level of consciousness, and it's not your thought. It's not your thought. When people invent things, okay, spirit will pour into the river that is thought forms an invention. And 4 people around the globe will like get this downloaded into them and think, oh yeah, that's, you know, everybody wanted at the same time to invent the flying machine. And only those crazy enough to go against the norm of the thinking, only those that are crazy enough were like, okay, yeah, I'm going to try this building of a flying machine. The Wright brothers and many others. Meanwhile, the most of the collective were like, how ridiculous, you can't fly. Because it wasn't in their consciousness. So as we open ourselves, we are able to like pull in information and get spiritual downloads where we can see and understand the world from a completely different perspective. One that's not based in the common thinking of society. And so those are often seen as outcasts. The most, you know, fascinating, interesting inventors were not always recognized within society until well past their death. You know, a lot of them were shunned and repressed. Look at Tesla. You know, his work was like hidden and repressed, and now there's a car with his name on it. If you don't know about Nikola Tesla, I highly recommend going and looking into him, because he was an inventor far before his time. I wonder what his spirit is saying as he looks down and sees Elon Musk running his name. You know, that must be very weird from the spiritual level. Oh, look at this dude running with my inventions, running with my knowledge, right? So life did not go very well for Nikola Tesla. It certainly is not going as well for him as it's gone for Elon Musk. But they were ahead of their time. They saw things in a world. Many people who see things and understand things from higher perspective are seen as outcasts, are seen as crazy, are seen, you know. Another one that comes to my mind right now is Vincent van Gogh, an absolute genius who was in his death his work became millions of dollars. In his life, he was a starving artist, a large majority of his career. And, you know, he was seen as mad. Well, he did chop his ear off. I don't recommend anyone doing that. But this whole spiritual realms of the higher dimension, when we tap into it, understand that you're tapping into things that, you know, up until since the last 10, 12 years, very few people were gifted with that much opening. Most people have a closed, you know, the people that you call normies, and please don't refer to anybody as normies. That's a spiritual ego interpretation of people who are at a different place in their own awakening and evolution. Some souls are old souls and have been doing this awakening process for lifetimes. Other souls are new souls. Would you laugh at or put down a kindergarten person because they don't know how to do algebra? No, of course not. You wouldn't have that expectation. So why do we have that expectation that new souls are coming down and they're learning lessons that you already learned? It's very cruel, and you know, it's spiritual ego. If we're looking at others that have fewer vortices open than we do, everybody is in their own spiritual evolution. And that doesn't make me better than anybody else. It just means I've been here longer. Yeah, that's it. My soul has been doing this a little bit longer because I have more history. That doesn't make me better. It just makes me at a different point of the board. You know, this big board game that is life. So I'm not going to laugh at somebody that's just new on the board, no more than I would laugh at an infant for not being able to drive a car. So when we have more knowledge and more understanding from a spiritual perspective, we don't label anybody as being beneath us. We just see them as being in a different place than us. And we may not have the same level of understanding or knowledge that has been accumulated through many lifetimes of experience. So the symbolic connection here is the purest form of energy that is grace. And that's why we don't call people normies, is because that's not showing them grace. When we have grace, we go, oh, I love you and I see you for where you are. And I'm not going to put you down for that. That doesn't mean I want to hang out with you. You know, maybe not. Maybe somebody's down here learning the lesson of addiction that you already learned. And so you don't want to hang out in the pub with them. But you don't put them down because they haven't figured out what you've figured out. You just understand that their soul still has to figure it out. Just like you figured it out. You figured it out and left the pub. They'll figure it out on their soul's trajectory when it's their soul's time to learn their soul's lessons. We can't fix, heal, or change people. You know, the expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. When we have knowledge, when we have wisdom, we understand, absolutely. If the horse asks me, can you lead me to water? We can lead the horse to water. But even if we get them there, that doesn't mean they're going to drink from the knowledge, right? And knowledge has been indoctrinated in us as something to be afraid of. You know, think of the story of Adam and Eve, and oh my God, don't you dare eat from the tree of knowledge. And yet there was a divine feminine that was like, what are you talking about? If there's knowledge for me to have, I'm going to have it. I'm going to obtain it. And then what happened? The poor woman was like rewritten in history to be naughty, to be bad, to be sinful. The quest for knowledge is not a sinful act. It's a natural progression down here on life school. Right? So the indoctrination was, don't try to like ascend out of the common thinking. Instead, just parrot back all the things that we've been told. So it's very interesting. There's a fabulous series on Gaia. If you have an opportunity to just get yourself Gaia for a year, okay? And there is a show on that called Ancient Civilizations. I highly recommend it because it might challenge a lot of your thinking, a lot of your knowledge that you think that you have. But let's go back to the symbolic connection. The purest form of energy that is grace, generated by our prayer and meditation. It safeguards our capacity for symbolic sight and conscious rapport with the divine. So this is interconnecting with something higher and greater than ourselves, which is why meditation and prayer daily is so incredibly important. Silencing the mind. And, you won't silence it. I don't know if Zen masters silence it, but you can observe it and go, look, I'm having another thought. Oh, look, there's another one. Oh, look, there's a reminder. Oh, look, there's a worry. And so the more we watch and observe, the more we realize our mind is just running amok a lot of time, just constantly in a state of business. And the goal of Spirit School is to teach us to get out of busyness and into beingness. And I've been working at this for years, and it's exceptionally challenging. Have I mastered beingness? No. I've still got a long way to go to fully master presence in the present moment, but I can help, as many of us struggle with this, struggle with the mind, and there's been tools that I've used along the path to help me with beingness. And what I'm thinking of just now is the tool that is puzzles. When you're sitting down and you're doing a physical puzzle, you can't help but focus and all of your attention on, I need to find this certain color, this certain shape, this certain thing. So you cannot be worrying about other things if you're actually looking for puzzle pieces, if you're actually focused. So as far as a meditative practice goes that isn't sitting there and just zoning out, try puzzles. Try puzzles. Some expert opinion in regards to mastery of presence and mastery of the mind. Michael Singer, Eckhart Tolle, read their works. I really like Michael Singer a little bit better, to be honest with you, because his language is a little bit easier it's a little bit more palatable. At least it was for my autistic mind. Eckhart Tolle is profound, without question, and I've read The Power of Now probably 4 or 5 times, and each time I get confused a little bit. So I do find Michael Singer's teachings a little bit easier for me to know, for me to understand. The sense and action here is coming into the sense of I am. It's I am consciousness. It's the oneness. But how do we become one with all when everything around us feels outside of us? And the presence of oneness in my personal experience has been felt the more I go into self. So for me to understand everything outside of self, I have to go into self. Because when you go in, you understand out. It's, again, that inversion, that level of opposition, the polarity, the duality, however you want to describe it, that the answer that you seek outside of yourself is going to be found inside of yourself. Meditation, prayer, self-healing, self-awareness, self. We need to go into the self in silence and sit with self. And as we do that and do the healing work and do the shadow work and do the inner child work and do, the body work and heal our bodies and heal our emotions by experiencing our emotions and heal our mind by observing our mind and questioning our mind through critical thought. Is this thought true? Nobody loves me, everybody hates me. Is that thought true? No, that thought isn't true. Is that thought valid? No, that isn't valid. Is that thought a program? A thought form that's been locked inside of me, that's running as a malware program? Sure. So when we start to critically think about our thinking, we can ascend up out of the limitations of the mind and open ourselves up into the crown, into the oneness that is all. Because then we realize I'm not the be-all and end-all. There is something I am a part of, I am one with, but I am not everything. I am both everything and nothing in the grand scheme of things. And so we learn many, many more lessons in spiritual school as these vortices open. And if we don't have all these vortices open in our crown chakra, there is a sense of disconnection from the world. And we do think and rely too heavily on the age of reason, which is the most unreasonable age if you think about it. So how's that for an inversion? We're supposed to be in the age of enlightenment, the age of reason, the age of awareness. But if you look back for the last 500 years, what is reasonable? What in humanity's actions is based on any form of wisdom? We destroy the environment we need to survive, to breathe the air, to drink the water. We kill each other in the name of consumerism and colonialism. We disempower and manipulate and just have a long-standing cycle of trauma that's passed on generation to generation. What if that is reasonable? None of that is reasonable because it's all preventing us from thriving, from standing in our true power. So, maybe we should question that as well. So a lot of questioning happens up here in the crown. And when, as I said, when we're all blocked off and we're thinking that we know everything and our minds are correct and that we're reasonable and we're stuck on beliefs, then what happens is over time our bodies become diseased. We are living in a state of disease and our minds become disordered. You know, just even that word, disordered. Were we ordered? Yes, we were following lots of ordered. And so when we step out of the orders that we have been indoctrinated with, we are labeled as disordered. When in reality, we're probably becoming unordered. We're no longer just accepting what we are being told to do, but that's an act of thought form rebellion. And you're much harder to control if you have thought form rebellion. So to prevent your rebellion, I'm going to label you with something that's called a disorder, so that you get back in line and follow orders. And then you're like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm out. I'm not doing that. So I'm no longer accepting any definitions that call me disordered. Am I unordered? Yeah. Am I X-ordered? Sure. But I'm not disordered, because the entire ordering system is nonsensical. It is dysfunctional. It is unhealthy. So in questioning everything, I become unordered and I free myself from the systems, from the matrix, right? The matrix isn't a place. It's constructed with thought forms. I did a video a good few years back on the physical manifestation of disease in the crown chakra. Please feel free to go watch that if you want to have more information about what happens when, you know, the trauma happens to the crown chakra and the physical symptoms that occur because of that. Let's talk a little bit about addictions of the crown chakra. And the first one is religion. Dun, dun, dun. Many people were ordered to follow the indoctrination of strict and rigid religious teachings, some of which have been used very inappropriately and very destructively if you think about cults. And many people are standing up and standing out and speaking up about, it's what it's been like to escape from cults. I find the whole thing very fascinating because, people join a cult because they're wanting community. That root chakra has no connection, right? So I'm going to look for new family, new connection, new this or that. Oh, look at this person that has all this wisdom and connection to the divine. I myself am not connected to the divine, so I need to find the divine through somebody else. Instead of understanding that I can find the divine wherever I am, whenever I am, because I have my own crown chakra and I can connect in. So in the process of being ordered, we are indoctrinated to believe that God is something outside of ourselves and can only be obtained through certain spiritually, gifted people, or like royalty. They are the connection to the divine. I don't know. Their behavior doesn't seem very divine to me. The age of reason? Is it even reasonable in this day and age to have a royal family that we pay for? And it just kind of look at Prince Andrew. There's an example of like a collapsing structure, a part of the matrix that is like completely collapsing. And more truths will come to light. More truths will come to light. But we're living in an old paradigm where we have royalty and we have leaders telling us how to connect to the divine. When you can sit down, or you can put your head into child's pose and get your forehead onto the ground and pray, meditate and pray, you've got a connection right then and there to you understand things. Because you're connecting in, you're no longer negating your connection and having to go through somebody else that can easily manipulate. How many leaders do we have to see now that this system is corrupt? How many yogis have been exposed for manipulating their students and, obtaining sexual favor? How many gurus, the same? How many priests have acted in less than priestly manner? There's a flaw in the system. And so religious addiction and being caught into dogma is a process of detaching yourself from somebody that is acting as an intermediary when we no longer need one. And that's why I've always said, I don't want to be your guru. Be your own guru. You are your own guru. We are able to connect to spirit and the divine anytime we want. The other addiction that's associated here is spiritual practices. So this is where we get all caught up into spiritual bypassing. I don't need to do the shadow work because I can just do ayahuasca. I can just do Cambo. I can just do acid or magic mushrooms or other, psychotropic drugs that bring me to the highest realms. And then where is the grounding in that? Where's the grounding in that practice? Where is like the earthly attachment into the here and now and presence and being in your beingness? If you're constantly seeking outside of yourself something to like expedite out, then it can easily become an addiction. And I've known people that are like always going to the next retreat and always going to the next this and that, thinking that this is going to be the path to enlightenment, but then they fail to do any of the integration work. And while I'm not saying you shouldn't use sacred medicines, I'm saying you should use them with discernment. And you should allow yourself the reality that you still need to have the human experience. You still need to emote. You still need to face your fears. You still need to do the shadow work. You still need to do the inner child reparenting. You still need to reprogram your mind. So while these spiritual medicines and spiritual practices of like intense weekend retreats might open and clear out, you know, one or two of these vortices for you, they also might open you too fast. And I've done a lot of warnings on when you mix Kundalini with some of these medications, you're basically pouring petrol on top of a fire, and it can cause psychosis. You can find yourself, as many people do, now do your research, many people do, in a psych ward. Is that grounding you in reality? Is that bringing you closer to enlightenment? No, it's very destabilizing. So a lot of the stuff, if we're always just kind of working up in the higher realms and we're not grounded, what happens is there's an imbalance. And spiritual abuse is something else I want to just talk about here, because, you know, I was talking about people that place themselves higher than others, yogis, gurus, and I'm not saying all, I'm just saying be cautious, buyer beware. Spiritual teachers, spiritual, you know, healers. Just because people have opened themselves to certain gifts, that doesn't mean that they're grounded in ethics and morals. Spiritual narcissism is alive and well in spiritual community, and you can be led astray very easily. You can be traumatized in situations that you're supposed to be seeking help. You know, you seek help and solace in a church or, you know, in another institution that's religiously run. It's still being religiously run by humans. Humans are infallible, so nobody is above you. And that's another lesson that we need to learn many times the hard way on this spiritual path. Another clearing is, I can't negate my power to somebody else who is an expert. Because many of these experts are misusing their power because they want you as a follower. They want your money. They want your body. You know, what is their motivation? If their motivation is, you know, royalty, they want taxpayers' money. Spiritual leaders in community, they want you to like almost worship them because they want you to keep coming time and time. They want you to buy their books. They want you to show up at their retreats and pay $5,000. You have to question everything. Just because something looks shiny doesn't mean it is. We learned that lesson from the fairy tale Snow White. That apple was nice and shiny, and it was full of poison. So as our discernment comes online in our third eye, we open ourselves to new levels of awareness and knowledge. And so really the cure for the crown chakra is discernment. Is trusting your own intuition and your own knowledge and your own body sensations. It's to go within. The more you go within, the more you'll trust yourself. So the path to the universal identity, as I said, is through self-knowledge. The more you work on self, the more you will understand the world. This is all bringing us into beingness. So spiritual practice is an interesting one because along my journey I've dedicated my life to this awakening process. Since 2019, I haven't had a full-time job. My full-time job has been healing myself, doing spiritual practices, healing practices, and this and that and the other to keep myself going. And there is a time and a place for that. You know, you do need to do healing work. And then you come to a place where you just have to be. And you have to put down the spiritual texts and the constant seeking of more information. And you have to put down the spiritual practices for a period of time and just exist. How is it to be a spiritual person washing a dish? How is it to be a spiritual person just going for a walk? How is it to be a spiritual person just existing? Just existing. And that's the letting go of all attachments. So the demon energy here is attachments. Ask yourself, honestly, question, what am I attached to? Am I attached to any addictions in the lower chakras? Am I attached to any people? Am I attached to my home? Am I attached to my things? Am I attached to, what are you attached to? Because on your spiritual awakening, you're going to have to learn the lesson of letting go. So letting go is another lesson of the 972 lessons that you need to learn. And that means letting go of every single one of your attachments. And we all have attachments. Absolutely, that's the human condition that keeps us attached to the matrix. And so every single one of those is a string keeping you stuck in the thought form that is the matrix thinking. I need this makeup. I've met women that can't leave their house without makeup on their face. That's a pretty serious attachment. You can't exist. You can't just be in the world walking around unless you have makeup on your face. You know, I've met loads of people that can't socialize without alcohol or drugs. So I'm not being if I require an attachment to something. You know, another matrix belief is we need people. Yeah, you did when you were 6 months old, but as an adult, you don't actually need people. You know, they're nice. It feels lovely to be hugged. I would love to be hugged again one day. Feels lovely. I really hope my last time wasn't my last time, if you know what I mean. But do I need it? There's a difference between needing something and wanting something, enjoying something, deriving pleasure from something. But where there is needing, there's a robbing you of pleasure because it's an attachment. So what thought forms am I attached to? What beliefs am I attached to? What things am I attached to? What behaviors am I attached to? One by one by one, you're going to be asked by Spirit, or in my case, demanded by Spirit, to let go of. Got to let go of all the attachments. Because each one of those attachments is a cord. You know the scene in The Matrix where like they free themselves from the pod and there's all those like cords attaching? Well, just think of yourself as being imprisoned by all your attachments. They're all strings that are holding you in place so you can't exist without them. You know, if you are attached to marijuana, how do you travel? You know, you risk imprisonment if you travel to certain countries with marijuana in your possession. And if you take that risk, that's an addiction. You know, you can't exist unless you have that substance. So we need to sit with self. More and more and more and more. Why am I feeling this need for this thing in my life? Why am I spending money on things I don't have money for? Why am I doing this? Why am I staying in this relationship? Why? It's like the questioning of that 2-year-old self. Why? The developmental stage of the crown chakra is early adulthood and throughout your life. So there's not an end point. You're constantly learning more. You're constantly getting more. This is the assimilation of knowledge. As you go and experience life, you accumulate more knowledge. You develop more wisdom and intellectual independence, which is the detachment from the collective consciousness that is the matrix thinking. You develop a greater spiritual connection the more you spiritually evolve. There's the development of the worldview as opposed to just your community view. Like travel. Travel as much as you possibly can. Go to different countries, eat different foods, talk to different peoples. The more you travel, the more awareness you become. This is the where we transmute our education and become educated through a greater sense of awareness through experience, experiential education as opposed to indoctrinated education. This is the transcendence of our ego. You know, we go through the experience of so many ego deaths, and I'm going to talk about this. This is our spiritual maturation and our stepping into wholeness. Wholeness. The medicine wheel teaching teaches us the 4 quadrants: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. All of those. If any single one of those, if you think of it like a wheel, if any single area of those is depleted energetically, then the wheel will go clunk, 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 clunk. It's not going to roll. So we need to be in wholeness. We need to be our physical body well, healthy, nurtured, loved. We need our emotional center to be emptied routinely. And we've got a backlog there. So it's like we've got a bulge as that ball rolls because we're holding on to all our emotions and not emotioning them. We've got a mind that's rigid in its thinking. We've got a depletion, most of the world, in true spiritual connection. So our wheel kind of rolls like this. Right? Instead of a nice silent rolling of a wheel, which is our wholeness. The 7-year cycle associated with this is 43 to 49, and it repeats itself at 92 to 98. But this is a constant process, okay? It doesn't stop. The dark energy, or the 7 deadly sins associated with this, is sloth. And what do I mean by sloth is not like just being lazy. I mean by sloth is living a life in the mind instead of in action. Oh, I hope one day I'll live in a house by the lake. What can you do to make that happen? Do small little increments to get yourself to where you want to be. We need to live life in action, making things happen, not just like sitting back and going and daydreaming. That's not how manifestation works. You can't just daydream. So what are the fears associated with the crown chakra? Is the fear relating to spiritual issues such as the dark night of the soul. Now I have an entire playlist called the Dark Night of the Soul. The dark night of the soul is dark and brutal and destruction of everything because it's forcing us against our will to surrender. And what are we surrendering? Our attachments. One after another, after another, after another. It's also fears of spiritual abandonment. Oftentimes when we're in the void, I also have a playlist for the void. When we're in the void energy, we feel a complete disconnection to spirit. You know, where did my angels go? Where did my connection go? Well, because we're in an upgrading cycle, nothing is happening, and we like, did God, where did you go? Where did you go, God? Have I been completely abandoned? Ah! So we need to work through those fears of our own sense of power. Finding God from within, not finding God from outside of ourselves. We also go through a lot of fear when it comes to the constant loss of identity. Because when we lose attachments, we lose ourselves. Because the attachments had previously been giving us our definitions, our labeling system. If I'm not a depressive, then who am I? If I'm not a mother, who am I? If I'm not a woman by traditional definition of that, then who am I? If I'm not this job, who am I? If I'm not, this man's wife, who am I? If I'm not a drinker and a party girl, that archetype, who am I? If I'm not a vixen or a playboy or a fuckboy, who am I? Who am I? You're going to be asking that question over and over and over again. And the point is, in any given moment, you are just being. You are a being having a human experience. That's the only attachment, is to like, I can feel that I have a physical form, and I can sense my higher self is like, I have existence, I have energy, I have thought, but I am none of those things. That's where you get to the point of I am nothing. I am nothing. And I am everything. Or as Jesus said, the Alpha and the Omega. The beginning and the end. It is just existence. It is our will to be. We also struggle with fears of the loss of connection with the life and the people around us. So as you go through ego death and all our attachments are stripped away, yes, some of them we give away and we go, I don't need this anymore. I don't need this sugar anymore. I'm going to do something differently. But as people leave our lives and you're forced to be in your isolation for a period of time, it's very scary. It can be very fearful. So we need to face all of those fears to help us get into alignment with spirit and open, constant opening. Constant opening. I always look at the aha moments that come with new awareness as like having an anvil dropped on my head, because sometimes they're so insane. And that's what it feels like, is like we'll have tight pressure on the head as we're going through this awakening, and like it's like all of a sudden energy is coming in and hitting us at levels that never was, and energy is leaving us at levels that we've never experienced before. These solar flares, you know? Get outside without a hat on your head for a period of time and let the sun come and touch your crown. Let the sun come and touch your crown. I find it kind of interesting on a symbolic kind of way how many cultures have like head coverings. As in like, I need to separate myself, my crown, from God. You know, a religious indoctrination. Maybe we need to take off the head coverings and allow light to penetrate through the crown. Do some meditation, like outside in light with no sunscreen on. Doesn't mean all day. I just mean, you know, like a little bit of time every day. If there is sunlight and it's not minus 10 degrees, every single day, get outside and just connect and let the light penetrate us so that we're receiving the messages that we need to receive on the top here, and question everything. The cure for opening the crown chakra is to question everything. Question your parents, question your doctors, question everything. Be as inquisitive and curious as you can possibly be, because that's going to open you to greater levels of awareness and knowledge. And then we're going to have so much light coming in our crown, embodying us fully with light, becoming fully embodied with light, that at some point we're just going to elevate right on up, and I'm just going to levitate on off the screen. Hee. So this brings me to my conclusion of our journey through the chakras. It won't be my last journey through the chakras. I have many more journeys through the chakras to do. If there's anything in particular that you're struggling with, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and if I see that something might help, connect through, for the physical I've already kind of done. I did those videos before, and I do have a chakra playlist, so just hop on into the chakra playlist, and there's a lot of information in there, and there will be more that comes. So that's everything today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow on the Spiritual Warriors Zoom meetings, so that we can share knowledge and share understanding of our experiences. That's Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. and Fridays at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. The price for that is free. Donations are received. I do, of course, receive those. And if you would like to book a one-on-one with me to discuss any of the addictions that I have talked about in these last 7 videos that you're struggling with now, any attachments that you're having difficulty with, please reach out and set up an appointment with me. My services are based by donation. So depending on what price point that you're at, we can find something that's going to work for you financially so that you get the help that you need. You know, as an intuitive counselor, my goal is to give you tools, strategies, and tips that you can then go integrate and implement in your life so that you can make real change. Real change. Real change. So I'm sending everybody out there that is struggling with this awakening path all of my love. It is difficult work, but you will get through it. I am sending you from my heart to yours, peace. Peace in. And thank you. And thank you for all the likes, the shares, the subscriptions, and the supers. Greatly appreciate that. Keeps the channel going. Adios.